Okay, here we're going to set up the masks for the front deflector and the strong back on the secondary hull. Again, these masks were done hand in hand with the paint guide from Trek Modelers, so you'll get a better understanding as why the masks were set up the way they were set up. Okay, we're going to briefly go over weeding, as these masks have very small pieces, and we're going to be doing mask on top of mask, so it's really important that a lot of these lines stay in the same position, like in here. So one thing I do is when taking the weeding off the entire sheet, I'll cross cut little areas across here and kind of minimize the amount of masking I'm pulling off. That'll help you so you're not accidentally pulling off a piece of the mask that you don't really want to pull off. So I've already weeded these areas. I've got my clear coat on there. We're going to cut these out like we did before. We're going to cut them as close to the mask as we can, and then we'll start laying out the design. Okay, we're going to get started with the first piece, the easiest piece, and we'll build from there to get to the hardest piece. We're going to be working in this area right here, which is just these two little sections here. I'm just going to go over, we have our outer deflector detail sheet, kind of gives you an idea of what we're going to be doing here. On the Trek Modeler guide, that's why I'm suggesting everyone should pick one of those up, because it does go into how to mix the paints and how to create the design that we're going to do. And then, like I said, our masking is actually laid out to kind of help out with these steps here. All right. So these are all cut out, ready to go. Just like before, we're going to pull these off. Just rolling that off. And we're going to start in this bottom corner, and we're going to work our way along the line. Smooth everything over. If you got a little plastic tool or something, you kind of get the corners in there, get them all tight. Now let's go back to our sheet. So we put this entire mask on, and we're going to probably be removing like 90% of it. The reason we put the whole mask on is so we can align these little parts. So let's go ahead and start pulling off all this section we don't need now. Just start lifting one of the corners. And then with a set of tweezers, just pull everything off. Okay. Push down anything that isn't quite seated, and then we can pull off this center one. Okay, that's it. All right, so you can see on the paint guide, he's called for step number 3 after you've painted your shades of green. That's where we are. We're sitting right here right now. Then you're going to continue on to step 4, step 5. Then we're going to be laying on the mask for step number 6, which is just this large piece right here. So let's pull this off. Okay, so this is after you've painted all your green. You can just start in either corner. Now this should just butt up to the mask you have laid down already. Now, depending on how everyone puts their masks on, you might get a few white lines along the mask that you had previous there. This one worked out really good. If you do have some white lines in there, just cut some of the excess vinyl you've got just to cover those up. The whole idea is right now is so you can paint this area a different color. As you can see in here, it's actually going to be more of the darker green. And then once that's done, you can remove your masks, and that section's done. Then we just repeat it for the next section, and then we'll move on to the larger section, which is pretty much double these. Okay, now for the larger section of the front deflector, we're going to be dealing with these 4 sections here. These 3 have already got their clear on them. These 2 sections here, you don't need the clear on them, and I'll show you why in a minute. So let's just move this out of the way. Alright, the first piece. Start this in the corner. We'll start lining it up on the bottom and along the top. And just follow that line across there. Smoothing as we go. And you might get a few wrinkles. This is a large piece, but if you work it slowly enough, you'll get all the wrinkles out. Okay. And I'm just going to tighten up the corners here. The decals that come with the kit, they do this section in two, and I thought it's just harder for everyone to line it up, so I thought I'd just build it in one, but it takes a little bit more work, but I think then it looks a lot better. And just like the previous one we did, all of this hatch section comes out, so really the only parts that are sticking are these black lines. This is mainly just to get everything in the same orientation. So again, let's pull all this off. These pieces are small, so take your time, and they'll all come off. Push down any pieces that haven't quite seated. I know it seems like a waste of vinyl, but I don't know any other way of getting all these little lines all lined up for the next phase. So it's just probably better to do it this way. If you make sure your razor blades at almost parallel with the hull, you won't have to worry about scratching any of the pre-paint. We're doing this without any paint on it, but it's mostly just to show you application. And there you go. Okay, our next step is this piece right in here. And we're just going to be aligning it along the bottom. Or as close to. I wouldn't get too concerned about it, as we're going to be removing that section of mask. Again, this is only for alignment only. I guess just make sure your bottom end, the edge right on along this side, is the most critical. Move everything down. Okay, so this step we're going to be removing these hatch lines. Just make sure we're all seated in the corners. Just pick up a corner. Peel those off. All right. So each one of these steps is done I'll show you here. So this is kind of what we're creating here. Is that every time I mention a step, this is what we're talking about on the paint guide. So we're trying to create this final image here. So we've got this one on. Now I said these two here, you don't have to put the clear on them. Those two you can pretty much just pick up. They're a little floppy, but I think as long as you line it up in this corner and go up to the top and along this edge, you should be fine. So let's just try one out here. Just pick one up and just kind of lay it in. Again, don't get too concerned whether you get it exactly 100%. You can always add a little mask, a little one later, just to fill up any holes that are missing or showing. This is just to protect the area. You've already painted this area below, now we're just covering it over. So you can see here we've got no white lines. If you've had a white line show up, you can go ahead and just put some extra mask on there. Do this side. Alright, so now we've got this stage finished. Now we're going to be painting again with a different color. Then we're going to be applying on this mask. Moving on to the last stage. This is after you've had another coat of the green put on. Now we're going to be putting this mask on. Now in this stage here, we're going to be removing the center section plus those little lines that we put on this side. So you want this mask just to be just to the top side of this one. I don't care whether it overhangs this one. This area is already been painted, but I want to remove this line and this center section in the next paint. So let's just put this right up against it. So this mask is just to protect the paint that we've already done, so it doesn't get a different color on it. And the center section and those lines along the bottom get removed. And the center section. And this line. So basically what you'll be doing is there's like a light pink that we painted on this and that bottom line in there. And then that's it. That creates that section. Okay, let's move on to another section. We'll work on these little sections here. That's all of these masks. This is the rear deflecting housing. This is what we're going to create. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get this kind of paint scheme that's covered on the paint guide. So I'll get to cutting these out and we'll get to positioning them. Alright, so I've cut these out. These are our two sections we're going to use. We're going to work on the little one first, then we'll work on the double. So that's these guys right here. So your first section, let's just bring this in so you can see what we're going to do and follow along. Alright, so we're going to apply this mask and then we're going to remove some sections just like we did on the other one. That just helps with alignment. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some tape. This line here is nice and sharp. It's easy to start with. This one's kind of disappears a little harder to see where you're going to start. So I just usually line up a little green tape or blue or whatever color you got. That just kind of gives me a start point to run with this mask. Alright, so we want to start right in the corner. And kind of keep the edge along the bottom. Pull your clear off. And like it says in this step, is these bottom pieces here we want to remove. They're only there for alignment. So let's take these guys off. Okay. We also want to remove these white squares. Now you could either remove them during the weeding process or you can move them after. So as long as you keep your razor blade pretty much parallel to the hull, you should be just lifting up a corner so you can get the tweezers in there. Pull these guys off. Now that's the step we do after step 3 on the paint guide. So that's, we're talking, he's asking for these two colors, then we're applying this one right in here. Alright, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, for the next step, we're going to apply this mask and then pull off a whole bunch of it, leaving all these little black pieces. Just like before, we'll start in the corner. Now again, all you want to do is kind of lay this mask over top of this mask, so you shouldn't get no white lines. That will help you with your lineup. I said don't get too concerned if you don't get it right on the mark. A lot of the mask is being removed anyway. It's basically just for aligning to the previous one, but take your time, do the best you can. You can see we got her pretty good there. Alright, so there's a lot of little teeny pieces in here. These will stick, you don't have to be too fussy about those. But I'm going to show you a little trick that I got. Let's start back in here. So, what I want to do is pick up the corner. And then as you're lifting the vinyl off, give it a little wiggle. If you give it a little wiggle, watch what happens. Those pieces stay right where they're supposed to. You can start on either side. You can start in the long side or the short side. So again, lift up a corner, lift this up, and as you get to the little pieces, give it a little wiggle. It'll just snap the corners from the vinyl and everything will come off. There you go. Okay, so let's remove this center section here. Same as before. Lift the corner, give it a little wiggle all the way across. And everything should be fine. I told you these pieces are really small, so you can tap them down but don't touch them, they will come off. Alright, so the only other piece we got to do is remove the center section of this guy. Alright, that's it. So now you can paint your next step, and then these little guys have to get covered over. You can either use some spare masking or just use some masking tape. That just prevents these areas to do your last little bit of painting, but that's that side. Alright, let's move on to the longer side. It's just like the small side, only double the size. Again, a little bit of tape gets me my start point set up. And line up this edge. It is a big piece, so take your time. Bunch of compound curves. Those don't help that much. Alright. Those don't matter, they're coming off anyway. Okay. That's all these little white guys, those are coming all off. Alright. These are all coming off too. Just in case you see any wrinkles, just tap them down. You only need it sitting for the paint. And even though we've done a lot of tests on the vinyl, I can tell you this, that it doesn't matter what vinyl you use, anything that's left over 24 hours will double the strength. So I would only do what you think you can do in 24 hours or in an 8-hour day. And then you don't have to worry about lifting up the paint below. Alright, so this step is now done. We do our painting, we move on to this step here. Again, this one goes right over the other mask. Most of the mask will be removed, but just make sure and see if you can get it lined up as close as possible. It might even be better just to start right in the middle here, right where this line is. Kind of float it over top. Get it as close as you can. And there we go. All right. That turned out good. You flatten her down. Press everything down so everything's seated. And we're going to start removing these hatched areas. Again, we're going to wiggle when we get close to the little pieces we want to remain. There we go. You almost never get it off in one piece. It's going to break on you, but okay, and just remove these little white sections on these guys. Okay, you do your next painting, cover up these squares, pull everything off, and rather than a kit decal, you have painted on your decal. Alright, let's tackle the strongback. Sheet 18 has port and starboard strongback. I've got one side already weeded. I've got the clear put on. I did not clear this side. You'll see again, it's easy just to lay them in by piece. We're going to be laying out this strongback area here, and just a quick brief rundown on the paint guide that you get from the modeler. He'll show you all your paint colors and all your steps. That's what we're going to be dealing with on ours. We're going to be dealing with our steps. Our first one is just like we did on the deflector housing, is we'll be laying in the whole mask, but we'll be probably removing like 99% of it. So let's get this cut out and we'll get to installing it on the secondary hull. Okay, our masks are all cut out. Again, just like before, we're going to cut them out as close to the mask as we can, so it makes them a little easier to apply. And we'll start at this bottom corner. Alright, we'll be starting right on the front here, and we're going to run up along this line, and then also keeping in mind that we're going to be right along the pylon support. So right at the front, tap her down and run just below the hull line. And then just smooth her down. Just rubbing her down where all of these little hull bumps are, so it seats down. So the second one we're going to start back in this corner. These are going to be the areas we're going to line up first, kind of this area along this hull line. Whether we overlap this or not, it doesn't matter. This gets pulled off anyways. You're going to see here shortly. Alright, like I said, we're going to start right in the corner here. I don't want to get my head in the camera, so I'm just going to kind of eyeball it here. And using that hull line, the top one, like we did before, bring it in. that's in. So like I said before, now we're going to remove like 99% of this stuff, including the front one. So let's get to it. Alright, let's grab our scrap piece of paper, some tweezers, razor blade, and start pulling everything off we just put down. This second piece stays. And I said just be careful, as you're going to see here in a minute. What's going on? Alright, so these little lines here are really small. So what I found is the easiest way is, rather than pulling from the outside in, is pulling from the inside out. Then these lines will stay down for you. So let's go from the inside, find the tip, and pull this off. You can see how small those lines are, and I want them to stay. I don't want to pull against them and move them. I mean, you can always reseat them back down, just that it's for alignment I'd rather leave them where they are. So again, start from the inside, pull out. Again, you're going to have little things here, so you can wiggle through these, find out where they are, wiggle. I'm just looking where the next squares are. There you go. So on these guys right here, we'll be putting on a mask after we do some painting around here, and the painting is kind of a light color. I don't have it here. So we'll just pull the outside off for now. Don't worry about saving these. I've given you extras of these. Problem with the black mask is when you pull it off, it tends to distort a little bit. So it's really hard to put another one back on. Alright. So let's go back to here now. Take your time with this, because you got to find where those little lines are and make sure they stay down. Sometimes you have to start from the outside, but take your time, it'll pay off in the long run. So here's where we had that those two joining, where it just doesn't really matter, like I said, where it goes, because they all get pulled off anyway. I didn't want to join it on one of those lines. I figured I'd just join it in the open space, so it's a little easier to line up. This guy off. Okay. Like I said, these lines are so small, you got to make sure when you're pulling this off, you're not pulling the lines off. Make sure everything's back down again. Start for another one. Really small one just here. There's a little teeny guy right in here you got to watch out for. There we go. It's really small. It's almost not putting in there, but the detail's there. We got to do her. Alright, let's start at the beginning again. This one stays in, second one comes off. Just take your time and everything will come off nicely. Okay, so this one I'm going to have to start in another corner. Said I'm using my my model as a mock-up. It's not assembled yet, so probably a lot easier to work on this once this thing's glued together, but I needed to show you guys what we're doing. This piece lifted. This is only to give you an idea of what we've got. Okay. And we remove this. Remove the outer one of this one. There you go. So like I said, this will all be masked out here. You're going to be painting this one color, and then we're going to move on to our next step, which is just this one. So what we've got, this is the section we cut off. We don't need this right now. So I've given you another set of these. So once you've painted all this stuff, we'll start applying that stuff. Okay, like I said before, this is not, we didn't put no clear over this, no mastic. We don't really need it here. These you can just kind of pull off and put on there, put them on by themselves. So just pull one off. Now this is once you painted, there's kind of a lighter green you paint on here, and then you cover up with this. So once you got that done, you just lay these over top. That completes this step. Now you can paint another version of green on here, and then we cover up these. So these are, again, like I said, you don't need the clear on these. These you can pretty much lay in place just by pulling them off. So all you want to do is just kind of start it as close to the line as you can. Again, if you don't get this absolutely perfect right on, and you can see I got some white line here, I will cover that with some masking tape or some spare mask once we get to painting. This is just to kind of give you an idea. It kind of helps you out a little bit. You get the general idea. And you move on to the rest of them, and then you're pretty much done your strong back. Do that side, and start it all over on the other side. All right, let's bring that deflector in and the secondary hull and see how we did. So we just line this up. And you see our lines and everything is turned out perfect, just like we want it. Alright, well that concludes our application video for the front deflector and the strong back, including some of the painting ideas. Like I said before, if you have any comments or you have any trouble with anything, don't hesitate to contact me and I will reply. And if you are working on a project and you'd like to send me some photos, I'd be really interested in see how your project's going. And stay tuned for some more application videos. Thanks.